shower, 75 for the low tonight. Saturday looks the same, but Sunday, 60% chance of showers in the afternoon going into the evening, 88 for the high. Those rain chances continuing Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday with a 50% chance. We're going to stay in that wet zone. Right now, 76 degrees.
Support comes from Specs, focusing on whiskey and bourbon this month with sips of oak, vanilla, and more, featuring known and small batch varieties. More information available at specsonline.com. The fun starts here.
Streaming live online, check out HoustonPublicMedia.org. Download our app as well. You get news updated 24/7. It's KUHF Houston News 88.7, a service of the University of Houston. Houston Matters starts right now. It's 9 o'clock. Stick around.
While the Texas legislature passed and the governor signed into law new congressional maps, the redistricting fight continues now in federal court. I'm Craig Cohen. Today on Houston Matters, Gabby Birenbaum, Washington correspondent for the Texas Tribune, on legal challenges to the new Texas maps.
Houston Matters with Craig Cohen is a production of Houston Public Media with support from Baylor College of Medicine.
Also this hour, a conversation with and performance from Sitar maestro Purbayan Chatterjee ahead of a concert on the UH campus Saturday. Then from helicopters in Houston skies to bribery charges against a Houston company that involves its strip clubs to a mathematically significant date this week. Our non-expert panel weighs in on intrigues in the news on the good, the bad, and the ugly. We'll start with a news update from NPR and News 88.7. Stay with us.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Kristen Wright. Confusion and turmoil continue to dominate a closely watched meeting of vaccine advisors to the CDC today. They're discussing changes to the childhood vaccine schedule. NPR's Rob Stein reports.
On Thursday, the committee voted to stop recommending a vaccine that protects children against chickenpox, along with measles, mumps, and rubella for children younger than 4. But the committee also voted to continue letting a federal program pay for the shots. On Friday, the committee acknowledged members were confused when they took that vote and reversed that decision. Then, amid more confusion and apparent dissension within the committee, the advisors tabled a vote to stop recommending vaccinating all babies against hepatitis B within the first day of life. Rob Stein, NPR News.
Israel has closed the only border crossing between Jordan and the Israeli-occupied West Bank. It has also suspended aid trucks bound for Gaza after a Jordanian truck driver killed 2 Israeli soldiers. NPR's Jane Araf has more.
Israel said Friday it had closed its Allenby Bridge crossing until further notice after the attack Thursday by a Jordanian driving an aid truck. It identified the 2 Israelis killed as soldiers. Jordan said a Jordanian truck driver hired 3 months ago apparently shot and stabbed the 2 men before being killed by Israeli forces. The crossing is the only access in and out of the Israeli-occupied West Bank for most Palestinians. Jordan, which has a peace treaty with Israel, is also a main route for food and medicine for Gaza. Israel said it was suspending access to aid trucks from Jordan. Jane Araf, NPR News, Beirut.
Turning Point USA has named Erica Kirk as its new CEO. The widow of Charlie Kirk takes over operations after her husband was murdered last week during a speaking event in Utah. She'll be one of the speakers at a memorial service for him in Arizona on Sunday. It'll be held at State Farm Stadium, and President Trump, Vice President Vance, and several other administration officials are expected to give remarks to honor the conservative activist. Turning Point USA held a vigil at Colorado State University last night. Tony Gorman with Colorado Public Radio reports.
More than 1,000 people filled the east side of CSU's Canvas Stadium to celebrate Kirk's life. Gabe Saint, TPUSA chapter president from the University of Wyoming, said Kirk gave young conservatives and Christians a voice across college campuses.
Charlie was more than just some guy or the guy that got the president elected, senators elected, congressmen elected. He was our hero as students on college campuses across the country.
For NPR News, I'm Tony Gorman in Fort Collins.
This is NPR News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Amazon Business, offering business buying tools and technology with the goal of simplifying how to stock up to get ahead. Learn more at amazonbusiness.com. And the listeners who support this NPR station.
Live from News 88.7 in Houston, I'm Matt Harab. New this morning, a strike by Hilton America's Houston hotel workers, which was slated to end on Saturday, is now scheduled to continue until October 12th. This is the second time that the strike is getting extended. The union says Hilton has not budged enough from its offer of a $17.50 hourly wage. That's a $1 raise from the current rate. Francesca Carabaya is the Texas chapter president of the workers union. She says they are still committed to winning a living wage.
They make the profits possible, and the workers are not reaping the benefits of the hospitality boom that's happening, the tourism boom that's happening in Houston. So that's why the workers are out here. They're trying to get their fair share.
Houston First says the labor agreement should balance industry standards and workforce retention. Hilton, which operates the hotel, did not respond to requests for comment. Public meetings reviewed by Houston Public Media show revenue for both corporations is projected to reach record levels this year. In their statement this morning, the union representing the workers called this a, quote, defining moment in the history for union workers. The president of Texas A&M has resigned as part of the fallout from a lesson on gender identity. Our Rob Salinas says numerous conservative lawmakers called for the removal of retired General Mark Welsh after a video was posted on social media.
Welsh is the second A&M president to last 2 years on the job. He took over from former President Kathy Banks, who was fired over the botched hiring of a black journalism professor amid allegations she was a DEI hire. For Welsh, the controversy was over a lesson that included gender identity that was recorded by a student.
It's not legal, and I don't want to promote something that is against our president's laws, as well as against my religious beliefs.
Welsh originally came to the defense of the professor, but fired her a day later. Welsh is a retired four-star general who served on the Joint Chiefs of Staff during the Obama administration. I'm Rob Salinas in Houston.
And the man accused of stabbing someone at a Walmart earlier this week in Pasadena has formally been charged. Police identified 37-year-old John Hart as their suspect. Pasadena police said they had to use a taser to eventually bring him into custody. Hart is currently in custody in a hospital, recovering from injuries sustained prior to his arrest. For more news, make sure to head over to our website. That's houstonpublicmedia.org. Currently 81 degrees here on the UH campus. I'm Matt Harab, News 88.7.
This is Houston Matters. I'm Craig Cohen. Good morning. Coming up this hour, Sitar maestro Purbayan Chatterjee. Also, what's with all the helicopters? Our non-expert panel discusses on the good, the bad, and the ugly. But first, while last month lawmakers passed and Governor Abbott signed into law the state's newly drawn congressional district maps, the battle over those maps has just begun in court. Groups representing Black and Latino voters filed lawsuits to keep them from taking effect. They argue the maps intentionally and illegally reduce their voting power. Gabby Birenbaum is the Washington correspondent for the Texas Tribune. She's been following legal challenges to redistricting and joins us now. Good morning.
Good morning.
The state's prior congressional maps were already being challenged in court on racial grounds. How do the new maps differ in terms of, in particular, majority Hispanic districts?
Yeah, so the lawsuit argues that, what was wrong about the old maps and that had never been finished being adjudicated is sort of even more egregious here. So they say, for example, that in Harris County and in the Houston area, there's enough, Latino voters such that there should be two majority Latino districts. There was one in the old map, and there's still only one in this map. And the one that exists now is projected to go for Republicans. So they feel like that's not what they call a Latino opportunity district, where the majority of Latinos' preferred candidate will end up getting elected. And so that's just an example of how they feel like the new map in the Houston area elevates their previous arguments.
So from their perspective, essentially, the new map, just like the old map, doesn't reflect the actual size of the Latino population in Texas.
Right, exactly. And then they feel like the map drawers have done something that they've done in the past, in 2011, for example, and was one of the reasons why some of those districts had to be redrawn 15 years ago, which is that they've taken, precincts that are heavily Latino but low turnout and paired them with precincts that are majority white and high turnout. And so they feel like the goal there is to make sure that, if turnout dynamics hold, Latino voters, the district will elect a Republican either way.
based on a previous Supreme Court decision, gerrymandering is allowed on political grounds, just not on racial grounds. Is it a difficult thing to prove in court?
I think it can be difficult, especially now. I mean, the makeup of the courts have changed so much, right? We still don't know what was going to happen with the original 2021 map, right? That trial never finished. But the Supreme Court in recent years especially has been really hesitant to wade in on map drawing. They did rule in 2023 in favor of plaintiffs in an Alabama case, saying Alabama needed to draw an additional majority Black district. But there's a pending Louisiana case at the Supreme Court. We'll see how they rule there. But it's a precarious moment, I think, for the Voting Rights Act. And in Texas, we're still at the federal level, not yet to the Supreme Court level, but at the federal appeals level.
So who's bringing this suit that's making this particular claim?
Yeah, so it's a few groups you might recognize, LULAC and MELC, for example, groups that represent Latino voters. And then there's some lawyers that typically have been involved in Democratic map drawing cases, in particular with the Democratic Party of Texas, for example. So there's a few different complaints that have all come together on this case.
One reason it may be a bit challenging to make this case, I imagine, is that, let's face it, anytime we talk about Latino or Hispanic voters as one block, we have to note it's not one population. We're talking about a broad range of nationalities who may lean politically, some left, some right, and some you can't really get a measure based off of any particular nationality. So does that complicate the case that's being made here?
Yeah, I think absolutely. And I'll be curious to see how Republicans defend the map. And if they do raise that point that perhaps, Latino voters are not have never been the sort of monogamous voting bloc, but even less so now in an era in which, according to exit polls, right, President Trump won the Latino vote in Texas. So it's going to be, difficult to adjudicate these things. The point that the lawsuit makes is that when you look at over the last two elections, 24 and 22, at statewide races in these districts that Republicans have drawn that are nominally majority Hispanic, so about just over 50% majority Hispanic, that those voters have voted for in the margin of 60-70% for a Democratic candidate, but they feel like the districts have been drawn such that doesn't matter, right, based on the exact way the populations are construed and things like that. So we'll have to see. But yeah, I definitely think that's a point you've seen the GOP make, that Hispanic voters have been moving further towards the right, especially in Texas. And in some cases, they are, the way they've drawn these maps, especially in South Texas, they will be relying on, continued support from Hispanic voters in order to win these seats that they've drawn for themselves to make it easier to win. Since
you bring up President Trump, what impact have we seen? You mentioned the results of the 2024 election where he received a majority. I'm curious about his popularity right now. Do we have a sense of that?
Yeah, so what we've seen so far in polling shows that his popularity, his approval rating with Latino voters in Texas has cratered for the most part. I think the question for Democrats is, does that mean they're going to come back to the Democratic Party? And I think that's an open question, and that's going to be played out, in campaigns in a lot of these competitive districts, particularly in South Texas. But Democrats argue that Trump posted this high watermark, right, among Latino voters, that Republicans could do worse. And based on the way they've drawn these districts, potentially it wouldn't matter, right? That, Democrats could somewhat reclaim that Latino vote and Republicans would still win these districts. And I think that's kind of the crux of their argument.
When we talk about, again, that sort of overarching category, the Latino vote, another piece in all of this, I imagine, would have to be turnout. Is it clear how large of a voting bloc we're talking about?
Yeah, so Latino voters in general, though Latinos make up, right, a plurality of Texas, when you take out people under 18 and people who aren't citizens, right, they're not a majority of voters. And then when you look at turnout, that even further complicates it. White voters and Black voters in Texas have always turned out at rates far higher than the Latino vote. When I've talked to sort of people who work in trying to turn out these populations, they feel like there's some level of generational apathy, that, they have distrust for both parties, things of that nature. And so one of the, some of the Democrats I talked to do feel like, at least in a few of these districts, a potential way to beat back the map would be by increasing Latino turnout to levels that they saw in 2018, for example, when Beto O'Rourke really energized a lot of voters. And so turnout would be a potential way, I think, particularly in those South Texas districts and then one in the San Antonio area to potentially neutralize the map. But that would be banking on, banking on going against a trend that's been pretty set in Texas politics.
Let's drill a little further in specifically on some Houston area districts. Texas 29th, Texas 18th. They've long been seen as critical seats for both Latino and Black political power. From your reporting, what exactly do these new lines mean for those communities?
Yeah, so previously, Texas 18 was what they call a coalition district, right? I mean, between Black and Latino voters, they made up a majority. Black voters had always traditionally been the center of power there, and that's why you've seen, representatives like Sheila Jackson Lee and Barbara Jordan, who have represented that district over time. 29 was a majority Latino district, currently represented by Sylvia Garcia, that used to be Jean Green's district. And so what they've done here is they've changed 18 to make it majority Black. So instead of just being plurality Black, it's now about 51% Black voters. And then with 29, they've actually taken Latino voters out of that district. So while they've made it more Democratic, under the new margin, it voted for Kamala Harris by a bigger margin. It's no longer majority Hispanic. And so I think for Sylvia Garcia, that was a real disappointment. And then for some Democrats I've talked to, they worry that, when Sylvia Garcia eventually retires, that, that might not be a district that ends up going to a Latino member of Congress or electing a Latino because they no longer have the majority there. And so I think that's what Democrats are concerned about.
While we have you with us, I wanted to ask you a little bit about another story that you've done this week about energy equity and policy. You reported on Solar for All. This is a Texas clean energy initiative meant to bring solar panels, battery storage, and workforce training to low-income neighborhoods. The EPA has now canceled that program, and many of the grants were headed to groups like the Houston Area Urban League. What were they doing with that money?
Yeah, right now there was, what had already begun and was about to start was workforce development. So there was a lot of training in Houston and Port Arthur, training people in sort of being a solar technician and solar installation, solar contracting, various jobs that go within the solar industry. And then that was going to play into another big part of the grant was providing direct financial assistance for low-income households to put rooftop solar in, or for multifamily, complexes to put solar into those apartments. And so then the people who got trained in the workforce development, right, could have potentially then gone and had that client base and done those installations. So now they've had to cancel, right, some of these classes and cohorts they'd already put together for workforce development. And then they've been in the process of selecting sites, selecting homes for both to get solar, and then also in the Houston area, homes that were going to serve as these resilience hubs for when there are power outages, blackouts, that people in neighborhoods could go to a house that was, going to be on the grid and have resources. So that's now all in limbo, and that's something that Christian Menefee, the Harris County attorney, and others are trying to figure out what legal avenues they have to get that back.
Are there immediate short-term consequences, either for people that were going to have this installed in their household, or for these organizations that you're talking about that were doing training, either already planning it or doing it?
Yeah, they weren't as far along in terms of actually doing the installation on homes, but for the workforce development, absolutely. I mean, a lot of the groups I talked to, the Houston Area Urban League among them, and said now they're in the awkward position of having promised people these trainings and certifications and matching them with employers afterwards. And they have to now go back to people and say, sorry, our funding got pulled. We had you signed up and unfortunately we can't follow through. And so I think they're worried about sort of loss of trust in these communities that they go into and try to help connect people with jobs, that they're going to be seen as an unreliable partner.
Well, to that end, I imagine there were probably a lot of contracts signed and equipment purchased and so forth. There got to be some folks that are out money as a result of all this.
That's another part of it. Yeah, trying to recoup. I mean, people already bought equipment for their training sessions, booked space, all those types of things.
Are there any legal options for them?
Yeah, so I mean, this funding had been obligated by the federal government. And so I have to imagine there's going to be a robust sort of legal effort. I think when I talked to Christian Menefee, to the county attorney, he had said, he's cognizant that other people, some of the partners in the coalition, are maybe in less of a, strong position as he is to go against the Trump administration in court and worry about potential blowback in the state. And so I think he's trying to be thoughtful in putting together a coalition. But there were Solar for All grants in every state. So, this is not just a Texas problem and not just a Texas program. And so I imagine there's going to be a legal case brought potentially elsewhere as well.
Gabby Birenbaum is the Washington correspondent for the Texas Tribune. Gabby, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Up next, a conversation with and performance from Sitar maestro Purbayan Chatterjee. And later this week's The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Stay with us as Houston Matters continues.
Hello, I'm Josh Adams, General Manager of Houston Public Media. This station just lost $2.2 million in federal support annually. To keep our station strong, we've launched the Resiliency Fund, powered by community members just like you. Your support will help bridge the funding gap and ensure these programs remain free and accessible to everyone. If public media and this station matter to you, now is the time to act. Support the Resiliency Fund today at houstonpublicmedia.org/donate.
A Houston-based home generator service providing power to homes during unexpected outages, helping with connectivity and productivity. More information is available at genpro.com.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from listeners like you and from Baylor College of Medicine. Through research and innovation, Baylor continues to redefine what's possible in healthcare and medical discovery.
Support comes from Children's Museum of Houston, presenting Faithful Friends, an exhibit exploring understanding and friendship, where kids discover that while faiths and beliefs may differ, kindness and friendship are universal. More at cmhouston.org.
This is Houston Matters. I'm Craig Cohen. Purbayan Chatterjee is one of the top sitar maestros of the world. He's also gained recognition for his unique blending of traditional Indian classical music with contemporary popular music from across the globe. Chatterjee performs Saturday at the University of Houston Student Center Theater in what's called From Bandish to Bandits, a classic cool journey. He's here with us in studio this morning, along with renowned tabla player Ojas Adia. Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Very good morning.
Good morning. It's truly wonderful to be here.
Well, very glad to have you both with us.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Purbayan, let me start with you. How would you describe Indian classical music to someone who has never heard it?
So, in a nutshell, the roots of Indian classical music stem from what is called Drupad. It's a very spiritual, very divine kind of music, comes with a lot of peace and a lot of melodic depth. But it's also a kind of music which has really evolved over many, many centuries, actually thousands of years, to come to this point where it is today, where it has kind of, mixed and kind of adopted many other genres, and there are inflections and there are rhythmic kind of syncopations which have come into it, which makes it very exciting, very intellectually stimulating, and it's improvisational in nature. And yet it comes with a rigorous discipline. So it's like a game of chess.
Is that how you would describe what you're presenting to Houstonians during your concert on Saturday?
Yeah, I think I'm trying to present a game of chess which is fun, exciting, and which won't last for hours and hours. So
let's talk about the instruments that you two play. Just talk to us about the tabla. What should we know about it?
So tabla is a very, very age-old instrument, and this was popularized many years back. And it has a uniqueness. The tabla is made up of a rosewood, teak wood, which is called tabla, and the bass drum is made up of a brass, which is called the baya or the daga, and both together is known as tabla. And now it's used definitely for Indian classical music as well as for different genres, like say semi-classical, for jazz, for blues. For there are different genres in Indian music itself called ghazals and thumris and a lot more.
Could you give just a brief example, like a little riff of something, maybe a traditional rhythm that we might hear?
We have a musical language, a tabla language for this. So it's supposing if I'm having a conversation with Purbanji, I'll be like, if I'm asking him, "Hey Purbanda, how are you?" So I'll be like, "Dha, terikiditha, how are you?" And he'll reply like, "Welcome to Houston, dear Ojas." So this is a normal conversation.
You kind of can do that with your voice about as well as the instrument. It's impressive. Let's talk about the sitar. Where and how did it develop?
So the sitar itself stands for melting pot that India is. So the mother instrument is the veena, which is the age-old instrument which we had used in this musical form called Drupad, and which came down to us, from the Vedas. And then we had, the Persians come to India and the Mughals, and we had a great saint called Amir Khusru, who then took the veena and kind of broke it down and kind of changed the structure to make this very lyrical, this very, very, very versatile instrument, and which has also undergone several modifications after that to fit into like jazz, into pop, and of course people like Ravi Shankarji has, in collaboration with the Beatles, has taken this music to the world.
And I guess I'm curious about where we find it in popular music today. We were talking about classical music, but and you've certainly sort of brought it into the popular realm a little bit more. But can you give some examples of it beyond? You mentioned the Beatles.
Of course,
yeah.
But I would like to say, like, for instance, Ed Sheeran.
Yeah.
Ed Sheeran recently made an album called Play, which he's just launched a few days ago, where one of my students has played the sitar, a girl called Megha Rawut. And Ed Sheeran has become a good friend of mine. We're constantly talking, and he's always thinking about using Indian sounds. So a lot of these people, next, in the month of November, I'm playing with this Grammy-winning artist called Stephen Wilson. And he's a music producer from England. I'm doing some work with Mark Lettieri, who's a very well-known guitar player, part of the band Snarky Puppy, who I've also played with. So a lot of the jazz people, a lot of the even it's gone into hip hop. It's gone into a lot of the mainstream genres today.
Well, you're both here. Your instruments are here. We have microphones here. What do you say? Would you like to play something for us?
Let's jam.
Yeah.
Let's play something. I'll say what I played later on, because a lot of people know this tune, especially those who are Indian and those who have seen this, from a very popular web series called Bandish Bandits, and where Shankar Mahadevan asked me to play this song. So I'm gonna play this.
All right, take it away.
So it goes like this. Garaj garaj aaj megha ghanana ghanana chhayo re damaka damaka chamake bijuri kat hari tu raj aayo re. So it describes the rains, and there's this whole series in web series which has become really popular, and it talks about a musical family, a gharana as it's called, and this song is one of the, it's almost become like an anthem in India now.
What's the song called?
It's called Garaj Garaj. It's the sound of the thunder. Yeah. It sounds like the thunder, doesn't it?
Yeah, a little bit. Well, you've certainly got that sort of percussive
like
kind
that.
of thing. Yeah.
And people will have a better idea if they come to the concert and, hear us improvise it on the song a little more.
Yeah, tomorrow we're playing at the University of Houston.
At 6 p.m.
At 6 p.m. And we're really going to bring Garaj Garaj, and hopefully, maybe we might even bring some rain.
Wouldn't mind that, actually. A little bit. We're always a little twitchy around here about too much rain.
I know. Just enough to cool it down a little.
That's right.
Yeah.
You're known, Purbayan, as being both a master of Hindustani classical tradition as well as an innovator that brings in jazz and pop and world music influences. How do you balance preserving tradition with experimenting and pushing boundaries?
Look, tradition is like DNA. So to keep it strong and to keep it good, you've got to make sure that there is enough things coming into the mix for succeeding generations. Just like genetic material, when you try to keep something very kosher and something very kind of free of external influence, then the genetic quality of it can degrade over time. So we want to keep it fresh. We want to keep within the parameters of tradition. We try to push the envelope so that we can find new ground. We can start new dialogue, because that's what the world is about.
Oh, Josh, what is more fun for you? The traditional or the boundary pushing, or is it a little bit of both?
I started learning at a very young age from my guru Sri Mridangaraji. So he always suggested me to keep the authenticity of the Indian classical music along with the improvisational music, whatever I am doing. So it could be a solo tabla, solo repertoire, or it could be accompanying with Purbayan Chatterjee, and most of our music is all improvisational. So I like to play with different genres of music, different artists, and have that challenge of coming up with something new and some different ideas every time I play.
I don't want to put you on the spot, but since you mentioned how much of this can be improvisational, would you care to improvise a little bit right now and just see what happens?
So here's the thing. Why don't we pick up like a jazz, kind of a jazz standard, almost something which has also become an anthem. We'll pick up Chick Corea's Spain.
Right,
and then we'll bring in, because we're both fans of jazz music, and I've met Chick Corea many times. I've played with people like Herbie Hancock and.
Awesome. I have played with John McLaughlin, the maestro John McLaughlin.
Yeah. These are some big names, without question. Yes.
So we'll pick up Chick Corea's Spain, which is a well-known enough piece, and we'll try to improvise on it the Indian way. How about that? Okay.
Of course.
That's great.
Yeah.
That was really fun. What excites you most about the future of Indian classical music?
I think what is most exciting is that in India there's a newfound love and respect for all things which are quintessentially Indian. And we are a young country and an old culture. So it's a very interesting dichotomy. And I think we're coming of age to a point where we have gone through an extensive influence of global culture, of Western pop culture, and we are at a point where there's a lot of foreign bands, like Guns N' Roses, like Ed Sheeran himself, like Shawn Mendes. They've all come to India, and we have the Lollapalooza. I'm playing in this year's Lollapalooza in India, in Mumbai. But there is a newfound love and respect for our culture and our tradition, and that is very exciting to see, because what are we if not aware of where we come from?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I see so many youngsters coming for our concerts in India, everywhere in India, and that really shows, the intensity to learn and, understand Indian classical music, which is very important.
Purbayan Chatterjee on sitar, Ojas Adia on tabla. You can catch them this Saturday evening at the University of Houston Student Center Theater. There's more information at iaahouston.org. Thank you both very much for coming by.
Thank you for having us.
Just ahead, from ominous helicopters over the Houston area to a Houston company that runs strip clubs around the country facing bribery charges, this week's non-expert panel weighs in on intrigues in the news on the good, the bad, and the ugly as Houston Matters continues.
With federal support gone, Houston Public Media needs a stronger foundation for the future. The Houston Public Media Resiliency Fund is our response to ensure this service remains strong, stable, and community-powered. Your gift today helps us stay on the air tomorrow and the day after that. Give now to the Resiliency Fund at houstonpublicmedia.org/donate or call 800-364-8300.
So I made all the designs in like a month, and that's why I was like, guys, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. So we were hot gluing, we were stapling, but everybody looked at me. Like, I remember one of the dresses was literally me wrapping like fabric just around the model and tying it. And I was like, okay, I hope it stays, have fun. And I threw her onto the runway and everybody loved that. And I was like, okay, I guess we're onto something here. And they're like, Alan, you have an eye for this. I think you should really like learn the craft, change your career here, and, you know, put that creativity to use. I think that just the personality that you see with me as a person is what I translate onto my designs. I love a good black, gray, and white. Definitely comes back to clean lines, construction, very much just having you look as classic as possible, but with a nice little flair twist that's like a lot more, and it's just so in your face and you're like, whoa, I did not see your little black dress going in that direction. For me, it has to be seeing my client content. That has to be what really does it. The reason that I went into this was because I understand that feeling of being on stage and getting those claps and feeling just amazing. And so I wanted to give that to everyone. And I think by being a fashion designer, I get to. My name is Alan Gonzalez. I'm the fashion designer for Alantude, and you're listening to Houston Matters with Craig Cohen.
Think about your grocery bill, and then imagine you live in Alaska.
It's a really complicated system to get food to Alaska because it doesn't, of course, produce enough of its own food to feed, nearly 1 million people.
I'm Amy Scott, Alaska's tangled food supply chain, next time on Marketplace.
It's tonight at 6:30.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from Near Northwest Management District. Located off 290 in the 610 Loop and 249 in Beltway 8, is a developer-friendly business environment located at the intersection of innovation. NNMD.org. Support comes from Stages, presenting the Lehman Trilogy. The play follows three brothers from their arrival in America to the rise and fall of a financial company that shaped the rules of modern finance. Runs September 19th through October 12th. More at stageshouston.com.
A lot can happen in a week. Some of it good, some of it bad, some of it downright ugly. When faced with intriguing developments in the week's news, we turn to a rotating panel of non-experts to parse the good, the bad, and the ugly of it all. On today's panel, Natalie Arceneaux, president of Arceneaux International Consulting, and Charles Kuffner, who writes the off-the-cuff political blog. Natalie, Charles, welcome to Houston Matters.
Howdy. Thank you for having me.
Panel, you're not imagining it. There really have been low-flying military helicopters over Houston skies this week. They're a part of a collaborative training between the Houston Police Department, the Federal Department of Defense, yes, now also branded as the Department of War, and other law enforcement agencies. The helicopters have been seen as widely shared video showcases in Houston area neighborhoods pretty much all week. HPD posted advanced word about the planned exercises on X back on September 5th. For those freaked out by the noise and presence of the copters, I do have some good news for you. The training is supposed to end today. Military helicopters over Houston are just part of a training exercise, we're told. Nothing to see here, right? 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 Aside from that question, is this good, bad, or ugly? Charles Kuffner.
I mean, I guess it's fine. I expect they do have to do some training, and so, there's only so much that can be done virtually. So, paranoid, visions aside, it's probably fine. For what it's worth, I haven't seen it myself, so I can't comment on to how noisy or intrusive it might be. But I know those kind of helicopters do make a lot of noise. I will say I was going to when you sent out the prep materials for this and saying that the HPD announced this on Twitter, I refused to call it X.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to be all snarky about how that probably really didn't do a great job of getting the word out, because X, Twitter, is one of the smaller social media sites in terms of its reach. But then I looked and I saw they also posted it on Facebook. So that whole line of comedy went out the window. So yeah, that's about it.
We don't necessarily turn to you for comedy. It's okay.
I mean, we're non-experts have to do something.
That's right. Good, bad, or ugly, Natalie Arceneaux.
I'm kind of, there should be an indifferent category. So I can attest, Charles, to the sound. And when it first started, I think our neighborhood must be in the direct flight path or something, because I was like, okay, let me go check all the doors, because are they looking for somebody? I thought it was like police helicopters searching for something. So I'm like, oh my God, we got a serial killer in the neighborhood. He's killing people avidly right now. We got to lock the doors. But then I looked around and I realized, oh, it's a military thing. So it is loud. It's very disruptive. And I feel like they can do whatever scenarios they're planning for, zombie apocalypse, invasion, whatever they're planning for. I feel like they could do that during regular hours. Like, why are they flying when at my bedtime? I'm asleep at 9:00. Okay, so that's why it's bad. But I do think it's good in on the other side of that, because you have to prepare for all sorts of scenarios. It's kind of you're going to get a finger wagged at you if you don't, and you're going to get a finger wagged at you if you do, right? So I would rather get the finger wagged at me for being prepared than the finger wagged at me for not being prepared. So that part is good, that at least they are preparing for things. What I would like to ask for, since I can now, is, since we pay our HOAs so much money, how about the HOAs send out a notice saying, hey guys, there's going to be stuff happening and we're in the flight path? That would be great.
I mean, this assumes that the HOA is up on their social media.
Well, yes. But that would be nice. I mean, and maybe a little sign somewhere on a freeway or something, because not everybody's on social media. And, to try, I have Twitter /X, whatever we want to call it. I haven't been on it in forever.
Yeah.
This is my core of communications.
I will admit,
Spread the word.
I didn't consider the zombie apocalypse possibilities here. It makes me wonder if they had, if they also had, someone role playing that part of it too.
All right, I think we can move on. Panel executives at a Houston-based company that owns strip clubs as well as bars and restaurants nationwide faces bribery charges in the state of New York. RCI Hospitality Holdings owns and operates more than 60 clubs, sports bars, and restaurants. That includes Bombshells locations here in the Houston area and Rick's Cabarets in more than a dozen cities, New York among them. According to New York Attorney General Letitia James, RCI allegedly gave a tax auditor at least 13 free trips to Florida, hotels and meals included, along with up to $5,000 a day for private dances at its strip clubs, all in return for favorable treatment during at least 6 audits across a decade and to avoid other audits. In total, authorities allege the company owes the state more than $8 million. 5 executives in 3 clubs face 79 counts in a grand jury indictment unsealed Tuesday. Charges include conspiracy, bribery, and tax fraud. RCI's lawyer calls the allegations baseless. Houston-based RCI Hospitality Holdings faces bribery charges in New York and an alleged scheme involving its strip clubs to avoid paying taxes. Is this good, bad, or ugly, Natalie?
I mean, I think there's elements of all of it involved. It's clearly bad because, bribery really has no place, but it also seems to be the way of the world, right? We have lobbyists, we have super PACs, we have people paying for admission to dinners with heads of state. We have all of this, right? Those are all versions of bribes and a way to influence outcomes. So it seems to be the way of the world, but also everyone doesn't have access to do that, so it makes it's unfair, therefore bad. It's good that they have uncovered this, and then my only question here is, are we to assume that the people who they were bribing actually liked strip clubs? Because what if you're the person who doesn't go to strip clubs? Does that really help you any?
You're taking a risk. I
you know?
guess, yeah. Plus $5,000 a day? Really?
Making it
That's
rain.
a lot. That's making a lot of rain. Good, bad, or ugly, Charles?
It's good, and I'll tell you why. I feel like for decades, when you think of, business scandals and bribery type crimes and things like that, I feel like the strip club has always been an integral part of that world. Maybe it's a shorthand or maybe it's just a cultural signifier, but when you think of business scandals, strip clubs have always been there. I mean, and that could be for, inflated expense account reports. It could be for your straight up briberies and whatnot. But, and this is not just for true crime. It's also been for, cultural matters. You read a novel or watch a movie that involves some kind of business scam, business scandal, whatever. That sooner or later you're going to get a scene set in a strip club. And so it's good that, and I would like to thank RCI International for this, for, establishing that in these crazy times when nothing is real and everything is meaningless and the world is changing every second, that it is still the case that the strip club is an integral part of the world of business scandals. I would like to thank RCI for, reestablishing that bit of ground beneath our feet.
Your confirmation bias.
Allegedly.
Yes,
whatever.
Allegedly. It's confirmation bias.
I mean, I am holding on to this bit of the world not changing.
You say nothing is real. I say to you, mathematics. Math is real. And Panel Tuesday was one of those important days on the calendar for mathematics devotees. September 16th, 2025, or 9/16/25, or 3 squared, 4 squared, 5 squared. It's what's known as a Pythagorean triple, and it's called that because of the mathematician Pythagoras, who figured out how to calculate the area of a right triangle. He realized that when a triangle has a perfect 90-degree right angle in it, and you form perfect squares adjacent to all three sides, the biggest square has the precise area of the sum of the other two squares, or more simply, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. And in the case of 3, 4, and 5, that is precisely true. 3 squared, or 9, plus 4 squared, or 16, equals 5 squared, or 25. And with that, I'd like to shout out my high school math teacher, Jerry Hills. I still remember it. Good on you, Mr. Hills. Well done. Tuesday was Pythagorean triple square day. Is this good, bad, or ugly? Charles?
It's good, of course. I as a math major, I always appreciate math in the news, although I have to be pedantic here and point out that the triple is not the squares, the 9, 16, 25. The triple is the 3, 4, 5, the A, B, and C.
Right.
And this is because
this is the result, though, of the triple.
Yes. So I mean, in 9, 16, and 25 cannot be the sides of a triangle because in any triangle, the sum of the length of two sides is always greater than the sum of the length of the third side.
All right, Charles is a buzzkill. We're moving on.
Wait.
No. We got to move on. We have very little time. Good, bad, or ugly, Natalie?
I think it's good. Everybody needs their day, including the people who love math. I will also say I have never used Pythagorean's theorem yet. And I don't think it's going to happen.
And I also want to point out, and you can't silence me here, Craig. There actually was a Pythagorean triple day less than 2 months ago.
Oh, yeah?
July 24th, because 7, 24, 25 is a Pythagorean triple.
Okay. Well, I'll have to look that up.
7 squared is 49, 24 squared is 576, 25 squared is 625.
So much more information than the listeners
needed. No. You are no longer a non-expert
That's
panel,
right.
not on this topic. My goodness. I am very impressed, and I apologize for cutting you off earlier. That was some quality math, my friend.
Thank you. That was.
Very well done. Natalie Arceneaux is president of Arceneaux International Consulting. Charles Kuffner writes the off-the-cuff political blog, and he knows his math. Natalie, Charles, thank you very much.
Thank you, Craig.
With federal funding cuts, Houston Public Media has lost $2.2 million annually. In response, we have launched the Resiliency Fund, an urgent initiative to protect the programs and services you rely on. That includes PBS Kids, that provides free educational programming to children and families across Greater Houston. Your support of the Resiliency Fund helps keep this vital service accessible to our community. Give now at houstonpublicmedia.org/donate.
Starts here.
Support comes from Foster LLP, helping individual scientists, scholars, researchers, and doctors pursue achievement-based immigration options in their fields of endeavor. More at fosterglobal.com. U.S. and Global Immigration Services.
Support comes from Asia Society Texas, presenting Hung Xian Between Worlds, an exhibition celebrating the artistic legacy of pioneering modern ink artist Hung Xian, closing September 21st. More at asiasociety.org/Texas.
From the 1970s to the early 2000s, some rock stations were doing things a little bit differently, including on the radio here in Houston.
These FM stations no one ever heard of were reaching this counterculture. That grew. The music grew.
I got George Harrison in the studio by probably insulting him.
And there were an awful lot of listeners out there. Millions of people wanted to be part of this party.
The brand of KLOL was always rebellion. It was rebellion against the status quo.
We would actually get on the air and say, don't put a KLOL bumper sticker on your car because you will be stopped by the cops.
Every consultant and program director that you come across will tell you the music is the star and everybody else is just there for support. KLOL and the Runaway Radio were the stars.
Clips there from the documentary Runaway Radio, the rise and fall of KLOL FM. It tells the story of an iconic Houston station and a different time in broadcasting. Last year, when the film was first released on video-on-demand platforms, we talked about the documentary with writer, director, producer, and longtime Houston area media blogger Mike McGuff. I asked him, for people who weren't around to hear it, what listening to KLOL was like in its heyday.
Well, I mean, it was just total wild programming and escapism. You know, this was before the internet, when, you know, you had to really hunt for your new music and the news and entertainment. It wasn't as easy as it is today on your phone. So KLOL was one of those beacons out there that provided everything for you. And, you know, you learned a little bit about the rock artists. You learned what the new stuff was, the old stuff. So wherever you came in as a listener, and depending on your age, you could understand the past, understand the present. So it was all encompassing for a music fan, especially someone like me. I was really just into rock music, so it was very formative. And if you've seen the documentary, Lyle Lovett was even informed by the station and his musical tastes.
Yeah, he is one of a number of musicians that I think a lot of folks would recognize who take part in this documentary. Who else did you talk with?
We talked to Sammy Hagar, Melissa Etheridge, and Dusty Hill of ZZ Top, and that was probably one of his last interviews ever before he passed away, unfortunately. Carmine Appice, who is a legendary drummer, and Doug Pinnick of Houston band King's X.
What was maybe the most interesting or revelatory thing that you heard from any of them?
Well, I think the fact that, Lyle Lovett, grew up in Klein, is from the area, and the fact that he was in high school listening to the early days of KLOL and, really said at the time, especially in the 70s, it was a progressive station, meaning it played everything. I mean, it was rock, it was jazz, folk music. So he said that was a big impact on him just in his future career.
What, aside from the music itself, made the station stand out? Because there were lots of music stations. And
what made KLOL different, especially from a documentary term, would be that it's extremely visual. They actually had TV shows. They ran massive promotional events that were, they would give away Corvettes. They did all kinds of visual stunts to get people's attention, and that's what made it different. And actually, Grego, one of the DJs on there, said, music was important, but the real stars of KLOL were the personalities, and then that Runaway Radio logo, which of course we named the movie after, but that iconic symbol that I think most Houstonians, even if they didn't listen to the station growing up, would identify with that logo because it was everywhere.
There are still, to this day, of course, popular DJs in every market. But are we talking about something a little bit different when you think back to the 1970s and 80s in particular?
Yeah, absolutely. Just because they pretty much had the audience in the palm of their hands. I mean, it wasn't like you were competing with Netflix and streaming and everything online. They really had a captive audience. And most likely, in terms of Crash Collins, one of these legendary 70s KLOL DJs, he had the high school world of Houston listening to him every evening. And I'm sure they tuned in right as he came on and listened almost all the way through if they could. And you're probably not going to find that level of devotion now just because there's so many other things you can be doing with your time.
Were there any boundary pushing moments on KLOL?
I think almost every single day there were boundary pushing moments.
Can you use some examples?
Let me think of what we can talk about in today's world. There was always, so basically there was a line of especially with the FCC. I mean, Stevens and Pruitt, the morning show, legendarily liked to walk up to that line and then stick their toe over the line. A lot of humor, a lot of ways around phrasing things that would, you got the idea without actually saying it.
Double
entendre, theater of the mind stuff. And eventually, though, they did get fined several times by the FCC for going too far. And then sometimes I'm not even really sure it was them. It was actually more of a guest that said something that pushed over the edge, but they got in trouble for it.
It's one thing to be a fan of what a radio station was once like. It's another to make a documentary about it and to spend years developing it. Why did you feel KLOL deserved that treatment?
Well, I've always wanted to make a documentary, and this one in particular was something just because, as you said, I do write a media blog. And that was one topic that always came up. Years after the station's off the air, people were still talking about it, wanting to know why it went off the air. What are the personalities doing? Talking about the past because it represents their youth and the fun times in their life. So I thought, here's a subject, and as I looked more into it, it was the most visual station you're going to find. So it kind of worked for a documentary, and the stories, the DJs, were still in Houston that people wanted to hear from. So it worked out. It grew much larger than I ever thought it would. And I'm not even joking. In 2010, when I started working on this, I thought, well, I'll do this a couple years and then I can probably just put on YouTube, because YouTube was new and people were starting to put productions up there. And I thought, that way people will see it. I'm not going to try to spend so much money on this. I'm going to try to do as cheap as possible and just throw on YouTube. And then, wow, how things have changed. But I'm very proud of the way it eventually turned out. And it was held up by the pandemic and COVID. But I think during that time we were still able to work on it. And I'm happy with the way it turned out.
Finally, today we have so many choices for how we access music. You were talking about that. That means we can seek out music that was once never available to us, but there's also not the same level of shared experience as some past generations had listening to the same music on the same radio stations. Do you think we've lost something because of that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think the music industry is very concerned about that. There's talk of the monoculture going away, where, think about it, if you had FM radio or MTV, for example, they could, almost silo these artists at us and get us, and everyone knew who Madonna was or Billy Idol. And now, that it's harder to do that. Think about these award shows, the Grammys. You're going to tune in, and a lot of the audience will not know who the people are in it because we do not have that monoculture. Everything has become a niche now. So, yeah, I think it's changing everything, and we're going to have to see how it shakes out for the music industry and broadcasting and all of entertainment.
Mike McGuff there, longtime Houston area media blogger. He's the writer, director, and producer of Runaway Radio, the rise and fall of KLOL FM. We spoke with him last year. And that will do it for today's show. The Houston Matters team includes Michael Haggerty, Joshua Zinn, Brenda Valdivia, Mincho Jacob, and Laura Walker. Jared Carroll's our technical director. On Monday's show, scientists recently discovered evidence that could point to ancient life on Mars. We'll learn what they found. Also, the latest consumer tech news with Houston Chronicle columnist Dwight Silverman. And the Astros swept the Rangers, and now comes this weekend's battle for the AL West Division lead with the Seattle Mariners. We'll recap that series. We'll also talk about the Texans' third attempt at that first win of the season with Houston Press writer and Believe in Astros podcast co-host Jeff Balke. I'm Craig Cohen. Have a great weekend. Join us Monday for those and other Houston Matters.
Support